Picture a road 500 miles long, worn a foot deep into the earth by 300 years of walking. Now fill it with the grieving. Fill it with men who swore oaths to God while their families coughed themselves to death around them, with widows carrying the names of their dead stitched into their sleeves, with criminals sentenced to walk barefoot until an apostle forgives them. Add rivers that kill the horses that drink from them, ferrymen who overload their boats on purpose because a drowned pilgrim's clothes are worth more than his fare, innkeepers who water the wine and mountain passes where the fog comes down so fast that men freeze to death within shouting distance of shelter. And at the far end of all of it, put a stone church wrapped in incense smoke, where a censer the size of a cauldron swings overhead on a ship's rope, and a carved saint waits with his cheek turned, ready to be embraced by anyone who survives the walking. That's the road to Santiago de Compostela in the year 1350, the greatest pilgrimage route in the Western world, 2 years after the great pestilence killed something like half the people who lived along it. A place where you could bleed through your boots in the morning and stand before the bones of an apostle by evening. A place where the hospices are free and the graves are fresh and everyone you meet is carrying somebody. We're going back there tonight. Not as scholars tracing routes on a map. We're living it. One walk, one man. Everything he would have seen, smelled, feared, and survived, from the last town in France to the smoke-filled cathedral at the end of the world. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still can't tell whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about blistered feet, watered wine, and rivers you must never ever drink from. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. One thing before we set out, and then I'll get out of the way. The road in this story is real. The bridges, the hospices, the mountain passes, the dates, the dead king, the rules of the pilgrim houses, the warnings in the old guidebook, the rituals at the shrine. All of it is documented. The man whose feet you're about to borrow is not one man. He is stitched together from the thousands who made this walk in that terrible, holy year, so that you can make it with him. The road is real. The eyes are on loan. That's the arrangement. The cold wakes you before anything else does. Not the sharp cold of open air. The thick, damp cold of a stone room where 40 people have been breathing all night, where the fire died 3 hours ago, and where the chill comes up through the floor into your hip and shoulder like water soaking into bread. You are lying on rushes over packed earth, wrapped in a cloak that was soaked yesterday and is now merely wet, and your legs are the second thing you notice. They ache from the knees down with a deep, pulling soreness, as if someone spent the night slowly tightening ropes inside your calves. Then a foot lands next to your face. Someone is stepping over you. Several someones. Around you in the dark, bodies are rising, groaning, coughing, feeling for their staffs among the rushes. A man mutters an apology in a language you don't know. Somewhere near the door a woman is already praying, a low mumble, the same words over and over, and a bell is ringing. Somewhere up the street a church bell is calling the hour of prime, which means it is not yet properly dawn, and the whole room is getting up anyway. Then the smell arrives, all its layers at once. Wet wool, an entire room of it, steaming faintly. Tallow smoke soaked into the roof beams, the straw and animal sweetness of the stable through the wall, old cheese and older garlic from somebody's open scrip, and underneath everything, the smell of feet. 40 pairs of feet that have walked hundreds of miles, unwrapped by firelight the night before, greased, wrapped again. including yours. Welcome to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, the last town in France, in the 3rd week of March, in the year of our Lord 1350. Your name is Bernet. You're 24 years old, a cooper's son from Moissac on the River Tarn, where the abbey doorway is carved with the elders of the apocalypse, and your father's workshop smelled of oak shavings and wine must for every one of the first 22 years of your life. You've been walking for 26 days. You have perhaps 500 miles still to go, and this morning you will cross the mountains into Spain. You're not walking for yourself. That's the thing you'd want understood if anyone asked. You're walking because of a night in December, the year before last, when your mother, grey-faced on a bed she would not leave again, took your wrist with a hand that had no strength left in it, and made you finish what she had started. You need to understand what the pestilence did to Moissac, because it's the reason half the people in this room are here. It came up the rivers in the autumn of 1348. It had already eaten Marseille and Avignon, where they said the Pope sat between 2 great fires, and the graveyards overflowed into the Rhône. People in Moissac prayed it would pass them by. It did not pass anyone by. It took your father in 4 days, a man who could lift a full wine barrel against his chest, reduced to something that screamed at the touch of a bedsheet. It took your sisters, Pierronilla and Gilhelma, in the same week, 1:13, 1:9. Your mother nursed all 3, waiting her turn, and while she waited she made a vow, out loud, on her knees in the empty church, that if God left her even one child, she would walk to the shrine of St. James at Compostela and thank him at the apostle's own tomb. God left her you. And then, a year later, a slow fever that had nothing to do with the pestilence came for her anyway, the way ordinary death kept doing its ordinary work all through those years, almost unnoticed beside the great dying. And on the last night, her hand on your wrist, she said the vow was not cancelled. A vow to God does not die with the vower. It passes, like a debt, like a workshop, like a name. So here you are, her debt made flesh, lying in the dark of a pilgrim hospice with aching legs, listening to a room full of strangers cough. You sit up, find your staff, and begin the morning inventory. You do it the same way every morning, in the same order, by touch, before there's light to see. Letter, stone. Candle, boots, the letter first. You press your palm against the hem of your sklavin, the long grey pilgrim's coat, until you feel the stiff crackle of folded parchment through the cloth. Your testimonial letter, written by Father Andreu at Saint-Pierre in Moissac, sealed with the parish seal sewn into the hem by his own instruction. It names you a true pilgrim, walking in fulfilment of a lawful vow, and asks all Christian men to give you passage, bread and shelter. Without it, you're a vagrant. Hospices can turn you away. Town gates can shut in your face. In a bad town they can arrest you as a masterless man, and you can rot while they decide what you are. The letter is your name, your passport, and your honour, all in one piece of sheepskin. And Father Andreu made you sew it into the hem precisely because scrips get cut and purses get lifted. But no thief slits open the filthy hem of a coat that smells like yours. You check it anyway, every morning. It's there, the stone next. Small, flat, grey, smooth as a knuckle, riding in the bottom of your scrip. You took it from your mother's grave the morning you left, from the earth right over where her heart would be. There's a custom, the returned pilgrims told you about it round fires in Moissac, that high on a mountain in the far west of the road there stands an iron cross on a tall pole. and every pilgrim who passes lays a stone at its foot, and the stones have become a hill. You carry a stone, they said, and the stone is your burden, your sin, your grief, whatever you're hauling, and you leave it there, and you walk on lighter. Your mother never got to carry hers, so you're carrying it for her. 500 miles, one small grey stone. It weighs nothing. It weighs more than everything else you own. The candle. A taper of good yellow beeswax, thick as 2 fingers, and as long as your forearm, wrapped in linen and carried down the middle of your bedroll where it can't snap. The wax came from the parish hives at Moissac, and Father André blessed it, and it exists for exactly one purpose, to be lit at the tomb of St. James while the names of the parish dead are spoken over it. He wrote the names out for you on a scrap of parchment, wrapped in with the candle, 4 columns, small careful letters, because after 1348 the list would not fit in 3. Somewhere near the middle are your father and your sisters and your mother. You are, as far as you know, the only person alive who is carrying all those names anywhere. And the boots. Your father's boots, which is the one piece of him you could take on a road like this. Good Moissac leather, resoled by old Père the cobbler before you left, double-stitched, greased with mutton fat. They were a dead man's boots, and they fit you like your own feet, which frightened you at first and now feels like company. Every returned pilgrim says the same thing. The road is decided at the level of the feet. Kings travel it on horses. You will travel it on your father's soles, and how long they last is one of the questions your whole pilgrimage hangs on. Letter, stone, candle, boots, all present. You can get up now. Around you, the hospices coming fully awake. This house is kept by a confraternity, townsmen of Saint-Jean who feed pilgrims for the good of their own souls, and their rules are simple and posted in the mind of the stern old widow who runs the place. 1 night. 2, if you're sick. Bread in the morning. No dice. No women in the men's room. No wine after the door's barred, and out by full light. Because tonight there will be 40 more of you coming down out of France and the rushes have to be turned. The bread is dark and dense and comes with a ladle of sour wine cut with water. You eat standing up in the doorway, looking at the street. Rain in the night has turned the cobbles to dark mirrors. The town is one steep street, really, funneling downhill to the river and the bridge, and then up again toward the gate on the Spanish side. And the whole length of it is already moving with people like you. Grey coats, broad hats, staffs clicking on stone. This is what Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port is for. The name means St. John at the foot of the pass. The town exists the way a funnel exists, to gather everything spilling down out of France, all the roads from Paris and Vézelay and Le Puy, and your own road from Moissac, and pour it over the mountains in one stream. And when I say pilgrims, I need you to understand what that means in 1350. This is not a procession of the gentle and the devout. This is the shaken-out contents of a continent that has just lost, in 2 years, somewhere between 1/3 and half of its people. Every person in this street buried someone. Some of them buried everyone. There are men here walking off vows like yours, made in rooms that smelled of death. There are penitents ordered onto the road by confessors or by courts, walking off violence. There are people who simply could not stay in towns where every doorway had a face missing from it. Grief is the cargo of this road now, and the road is the only medicine anyone could think of. You walk, and you offer the walking to God, and you hope that somewhere in those 500 miles the weight shifts. You settle your scrip across your shoulder, Small, narrow, made of hide, hairy, side out, exactly as custom requires. The priest who blessed you preached on it the night before you left, the old sermon every departing pilgrim hears. This scrip is small because your trust is supposed to be large. It is open at the mouth, because you must always be ready to give as well as beg. The staff is your third leg and your weapon against wolf and devil alike. You listen to all of it kneeling before the altar at Moissac with your mother's grave 40 feet away through the wall. And when Father Andrea laid the blessed staff in your hands, and the whole remnant of the parish sang ye out the door, you understood that you were no longer entirely a private man. A pilgrim under vow belongs, a little, to God and to everyone whose prayers he carries. You step out into the street, into the cold, bright morning, and join the current flowing downhill toward the bridge. Today, the mountains, and you've heard enough around last night's fire to dread them properly. The climb begins at the town gate and does not stop for 15 miles. There are 2 ways over this shoulder of the Pyrenees, and the choice is made for you by the season. In high summer, pilgrims take the old high route over the ports of Chiese, the roof road, where the Roman legions and Charlemagne went. In March, with snow still lying in the high folds, the muleteers and the sensible take the valley road through Val Carlos, climbing beside the water. You go with the mules. A man at the hospice put it simply. The high road saves you an hour, and every spring the monks bring down the bodies of the men who tried to save an hour. Even the low road is a labour that redefines the word. The path stacks itself up the valley wall in switchbacks. Your breath goes ragged in the first mile and stays ragged. The rope pain in your calves, the one you woke with, warms and loosens and is replaced by a newer, hotter pain. You learn what every pilgrim learns on the first true mountain. Walking uphill is work you do with your whole body, your lungs, your back, the palms of your hands pressing on your staff, and there is no arguing with a mountain, no clever route, no bargaining. There is only the pace you can hold and the pace you can't. An old man ahead of you is holding the right pace, and you fall in behind him because of it. He's 60 if he's a day, lean as a whip in a sclavin gone the colour of dust, and he climbs the way water runs downhill in reverse. No wasted motion, never stopping, never hurrying. When you finally draw level, at a bend where the wind comes up the valley and shoves you both, he looks sideways at you from under a hat that has been rained on for decades. Slower, he says, in the Languedoc of the south, close enough to your own speech to be home. You climb like a man who thinks the mountain ends. It doesn't. Not today. Slower. The mountain teaches the pace. Your job is to learn it. His name is Guillem. He's from a village near Le Puy, and this is his 3rd walk to Santiago. The first was 40 years ago, for his own sins, he says, and does not list them. The second was with his wife, 15 years back. This one is for her. He says that much on the climb and no more, and you don't ask, because you're learning already that on this road everyone's cargo is visible and nobody's is discussed until they set it down themselves. What Guillem does discuss, endlessly, wonderfully, is the road itself. He's a walking copy of a book you've heard about but never seen. There's a guide to this pilgrimage, 200 years old now, kept at Compostela and copied here and there, written, they say, by a Frenchman with strong opinions, and one winter Guillem sheltered at a monastery, where a young monk read the whole of it aloud, evening after evening, and Guillem, who cannot read, kept it the way singers keep songs. The book counts the whole road from here in 13 stages, he says. 13, that's a rider's counting. On feet like ours, it's a month and more. The book is a rich man's book, but the warnings, boy, the warnings are for everyone, and the road hasn't changed its habits. And as you climb, he gives you the warnings in the voice of a man reciting scripture. At Lorca, in Navarre, a river they call the Salado, the salt stream. Let neither your lips nor your horses touch it, for it is a killing river. The book says men of that country sit by its banks with knives, waiting to skin the horses of pilgrims who let them drink. Ferrymen. When the rivers are big, the book says, some ferrymen load their boats with so many pilgrims that the boats turn over, and the pilgrims drown, and the ferrymen strip the corpses, and the book calls them what they are, which is damned. Get into no boat that sits low. Pay for 2 crossings before you cross with a crowd. Toll keepers who stop pilgrims with staves and search them and take what they please, against every law of king and church. False beggars, false alms collectors, men with forged letters and a box that rattles, gathering coin for hospitals that will never see a penny of it. Does the book say anything kind? You ask. It says the bread of Estella is good and the wine is better. Guillem almost smiles. And it says the Navarrese are savages, and the Gascons are drunks and speak so rudely of nearly everyone that the monks laughed till they wept. It's a book, boy. Books are men. Trust the warnings, forgive the temper. Remember the warnings. Every one of them is a loaded thing, and this road has a long memory. You climb through the morning and into the afternoon. The beech woods close over the path, bare still, budding, dripping. Twice you cross the growling water on stone slabs. The border between France and Spain goes by somewhere underfoot, unmarked, a thing for kings to know and walkers to shrug at. And then the trees thin, and the valley opens into a high green bowl with snow still lying in the shadowed creases, and there below you, grey-roofed, smoking from a dozen chimneys, big as a whole village folded into one building, is the monastery and hospital of Roncesvalles. You know what happened here, Guillem says. Not a question. Everyone knows what happened here. This is the pass where Charlemagne's rearguard died. Roland with his horn, Roland who would not blow it until it was too late, Roland splitting the rock with his sword before he fell. Every fair in France has a singer who will give you Roncesvalles for a coin. The old book itself, Guillem says, carries a whole history of Charlemagne in this country, miracles and battles, and the monks here will show you the very rock and the very ground. Is it true, Wes? You ask. Guillem shrugs the shrug of a man who's thought about this for 40 years. Something true happened here, long ago, and it wore a story the way a man wears a coat. The monks tell it as the singers sing it. Where the song ends and the ground begins, no one alive can show you the seam. Take the story as a story, and take the ground as holy, and you'll offend nobody, including God. That you will find is the honest music of this whole road, things that really stand wrapped in things that are told, and you will hear both, and I'll always try to tell you which is which. The hospital takes you in an hour before dark, and Roncesvalles is the first place on this walk that makes your throat close. Not because it's grand, though it is. A church of real Gothic bones this far into the mountains, built by kings of Navarre, and a dormitory hall so long that the far wall is a rumour in the candlelight. 120 of your paces, you count them, with beds enough for hundreds, because of the rule of the house. The brothers here have kept a hospice for pilgrims for over 200 years, since a bishop of Pamplona set it up with the king's help around 1130, precisely because this pass was killing people, and there is a song about this house that the brothers still like to quote, and the song says the door stands open to everyone, the sick and the well, Catholics, and then the song keeps going, Jews, pagans, heretics, beggars, the idle. Everyone. The door does not ask. The door is the whole sermon. They take your wet cloak and hang it in a room built warm for exactly that purpose. They wash your feet, actually wash them. A brother with a basin and cracked red hands doing for you what Christ did for fishermen, because that is the rule of the house. They feed you bread and beans and a cup of wine. They take the sick to an infirmary where women of the house nurse them, and they ask you for nothing but your name and your prayers. It is Holy Week. You had half planned it so, walking harder through Gascony to make it over the pass before the feast. And so it happens that on Easter morning, the 28th of March in the year 1350, you stand in the church of Santa Maria of Roncesvalles in a crowd of pilgrims from 8 kingdoms, while the brothers sing the Mass of the Resurrection, and the cold comes up through the stone into your ruined feet, and the candles throw gold up the pillars, and for the length of one long Alleluia, the weight you carry shifts on its ropes and sits easier. You do not know, none you know, that 2 days before, on Good Friday, at the other end of Spain, outside a besieged rock called Gibraltar, the King of Castile died of the pestilence in his camp. You will be walking through his kingdom within the week. The news is already moving. It travels by courier and rumour, faster than any pilgrim walks, and it is coming up the very road you're about to go down. You'll meet it, not yet. It's at Roncesvalles, in the long dormitory on Easter night, that you acquire the boy. You notice him first at the foot washing, hanging back, because he has no shoes at all, only wrappings of rag and leather thong, and he watches the basin the way hungry men watch bread. He's maybe 13, small for it, dark, quick-eyed, with the particular stillness of children who have learned that being noticed is expensive. When the brother beckons him, he sits and endures having his feet washed with his fists clenched on the bench like a man enduring surgery. Later, he is simply there, beside your bed space, wrapped in a cloak too big for him. That's my corner of the floor, he says, in the Romance of Navarre, jerking his chin as if you were disputing it. Then it's your corner. Silence. Then, you came over Valcarlos today, with the muleteers, and when you nod, I came over the high road, alone. There's still snow in the pass like this, a hand at his thigh, almost certainly a lie. A lie in the direction of survival, which you're coming to recognise. His name is Miquel. He gives it eventually, along with a story that keeps changing at the edges but holds firm at the centre, and the centre is this. A village in the hills this side of Pamplona. A father, a mother, 2 brothers, a grandmother, in the autumn of 1348. By the spring of 1349, Miquel. The house went to an uncle who had sons of his own and made the arithmetic plain. So Miquel is walking to Santiago, because his mother always said St. James looks after those with no one else, and as Miquel explains it, with the flat logic of 13, the apostle is the only kin he has left. He does not ask to walk with you. He simply, in the morning, is walking near you, near enough to be within the shadow of a grown man's staff, far enough to pretend otherwise. Guillem looks at the boy, then at you, and says nothing in a way that says everything. The road down from Roncesvalles goes through witch-haunted woods and drops you by evening stages out of the mountains and into the kingdom of Navarre, and on the 3rd day you see Pamplona standing up out of its plain, walled, towered, smoking, the first true city of the Spanish road. And it's on that stretch, at a village fountain, that Miquel does the thing you'll remember later. A man is preaching by the fountain, a big-voiced man in a habit of sorts, with a wooden box slung at his neck, its lid painted with an image of a hospital, its slot worn smooth by coins. He is collecting, he cries, for the holy house of Roncesvalles, for the beds of the sick poor, indulgence and blessing on every giver, and his voice breaks with feeling exactly as often as it needs to and never more. You walked out of that holy house 3 days ago. The brothers asked you for nothing, but Miquel who owns rag shoes and a stolen cloak, and as far as you know, nothing else, digs from somewhere inside his wrappings one small black coin, and drops it through the slot and crosses himself with the deep seriousness of a bishop. The collector blesses him without looking at him and goes back to working the crowd. Guillem watches the man with the box the way an old dog watches a stranger's hands. Roncesvalles sends its own brothers questing, he says quietly, with sealed letters in pairs. He shifts his staff. Come away, boy, both of you. You don't understand yet what's bothering him. You will. That coin isn't finished making its journey, and neither is the man who took it. Pamplona swallows you the way cities swallow country men, all at once and without chewing. You come in through the Pilgrims' gate with the evening crowd, and the noise closes over your head. This is a city of 3 quarrelsome boroughs jammed inside one ring of walls, Navarreria of the Navarres, San Kernion of the Franks, San Nicholas in between, and they have hated each other for 100 years with the special hatred of close neighbours, and each one rings its own bells as if to drown the others out. Mule trains, water cellars, and everywhere, on every corner, your own kind. Grey coats, staffs, hats, the shuffling particular gait of people whose feet are their fortune, all funneling toward the hospices by the cathedral, where the canons keep beds for pilgrims as their statutes require. The first order of business in Pamplona is money, and money is where the road picks your bones politely. You left Moissac with a small store of silver, deniers, and a few gros tournois, sewn into a band you wear under your shirt, the honest sweat-stained fortune of a sold workshop share. But French silver doesn't spend in Navarre. Navarre wants its own coin, the sanchettes of its kings, and Castile beyond wants its dineros and its money of account, and so at each frontier the pilgrim visits the changers' tables, and at each table a little of what you carry stays behind. The changer by the cathedral weighs your gros with hands soft as a bishop's, quotes you a rate with a face of stone, and when Guillem leans in and names a better rate, quotes a second rate, slightly less insulting, still a robbery, and that is the rate you take. That's how it works. And when I say the road eats money, I need you to understand what that means for a walking man in 1350. A bed at a private inn can cost you a dinero or 2, a supper the same again, and a labourer at home earns maybe a handful of such coins for a whole day's sweat. 30 nights of inns would beggar you. This is why the hospices exist, and why the word free, bread free, bed free, given for the love of God, is the most beautiful word on the whole road. The second order of business is the man with the box. He's here too. Of course he's here. His pitch is set up in the cathedral square, in the thickest of the pilgrim traffic, the painted box, the practised crack in the voice, and now, in the better light, you take a proper look at him. Big through the shoulders, a habit that belongs to no order you can name, cut to suggest all of them at once. A silver ring which is odd on a mendicant. He's calling himself Brother Sans now, and today, listen, today he isn't collecting for Roncesvalles at all. Today it's for a lazar house outside Estella, orphans of the pestilence, motherless children of God. The pestilence, you realise, watching coins rattle into that slot, is his weather. It rains grief, and he sells roofs. Say nothing, Guillem murmurs. To accuse a quester you need his letters read, and he'll have letters, and they'll have seals, and can you read seals? Nor I. The church herself thunders against these men, and still they multiply like lice in a seam. The road will weigh him, boy, it weighs everyone. Come and eat. But it cost you something to walk away, because Mikel's small black coin is somewhere in that box, and you find you keep an account of certain things now, the way your father kept tally sticks over the bench. Some debts are small and refuse to stay small. At the canon's hospice that night you meet the German. You hear him before you see him, a laugh like a barrel rolled downstairs, and then the man himself, vast, red-bearded, maybe 40, filling a doorway built for 2 ordinary men. Conrad, a rope-maker from Cologne on the Rhine, and within the half hour you know his whole itinerary, because Conrad shares everything: bread, wine, plans, opinions, at full volume. He is doing, he announces, the 2 great journeys in 1 year, Santiago first, and then, and here his voice drops as if naming a mountain, Rome. Because this year, this very year of 1350, is the Jubilee. The Pope proclaimed it years ago, a holy year at Rome, the churches of the apostles thrown open, and pilgrims are pouring toward Rome from every land in numbers no living man has seen. Whole villages on the move, and after the great dying, who can wonder at it? Half the world is missing, Conrad says, suddenly not laughing. The half that's left wants absolution. He buried a wife and 3 grown sons in Cologne in 1 summer. He mentions this the way big men mention wounds once quickly, while looking at something else, and then he fills your cup and tells you that Spanish wine is thin, and Rhine wine is proper wine, and that you, skinny Frenchmen, clearly need feeding. You like him enormously and instantly, the way you like a fire in winter. South and west of Pamplona the road climbs over a ridge where the wind never stops. On the crest, a line of pilgrims ahead of you stands black against the sky like letters written on the morning, and then the land opens westward, brown and green and enormous, and Guillem points with his staff down into the haze. Everything you can see, and days of walking past it, and then mountains, and then more land past those, that's the road. You feel it in your stomach, the size of what you've sworn. 1 league, then another. That's the whole craft of it, Guillem says. You walk. That's the whole of it. You walk. Below the ridge, at Lorca, you meet the first of the old book's warnings in the flesh. The stream doesn't look like murder. That's the first thing. It looks like any stream, quick and bright over brown stones, and the day is warm for April, and your water skin is light, and you watch a party of riders ahead, Gascons by their speech, swing down from their saddles to let their horses drink, and on the far bank in the shade 2 men are sitting, not doing anything, long knives at their belts, and a way of watching the horses that a cooper's son knows from the yards at slaughter time, the appraising look, the look that weighs. Saladi, Guillem says, not loudly, just the name, and the word goes up the line of pilgrims like a spark up a fuse, and men who cannot read a single letter of the book the warning lives in are suddenly hauling their beasts back from the water, because everyone has heard it from someone. The salt stream, the killing water. One of the Gascons argues, the water is clear, look at it. An older Gascon says 1 word in their own speech, and the whole party remounts. Dry. The 2 men in the shade watch you all file past, and one of them smiles up at the company, and it is the mildest, most patient smile you've ever disliked. Whatever is true about the water, the knives believe the story, and the knives have chosen a good spot, and that is enough for you. You refill your skins 2 hours later, at a well with a bucket worn shiny by pilgrim hands. "This one's sweet," says the woman drawing for you, and won't take a coin. And then, on the 4th evening out of Pamplona, you come to the bridge. You see it from the slope above the town, and the whole column of pilgrims slows, because after weeks of fords and ferrymen and wet boots, here is what a kingdom can do when it decides to love its pilgrims. 6 arches of honey-coloured stone stride across the river Arga, high-backed, rising to a peak over the centre like a cat stretching. 110 of your paces from end to end, you'll count them in the morning, wide enough for 2 laden mules to pass. The town at its foot is called, in plain Romance, Puente la Reina, the Queen's Bridge. A Queen of Navarre paid for it 300 years ago, precisely so that pilgrims would stop drowning in the Arga and stop being robbed by the boatmen who fished them out. Which queen? Now, that depends on who's telling you. The books argue about it, but no one argues with the bridge. It has been standing since before Roncesvalles had a roof, and men whose grandfathers' grandfathers drowned in this river walk over it dry-shod in 40 breaths. This is also the town where the roads marry, the way you came, down from Roncesvalles, and the other great way over the mountains further east, from Somport and Jaca, meet here, and from this town to Santiago there is one road only, one river of people, and the road will braid you together with the same faces over and over, day after day, hospice after hospice, until strangers become a company without anyone ever proposing it. It's on the bridge itself, in the last light, that you first see the widow. She's standing at the high point of the central arch, perfectly still, a woman of perhaps 40 in decent black, a proper pilgrim scrip and staff, looking down at the water the way people look at fire. You'd take her for a merchant's wife, if not for the sleeve. Her left sleeve, from wrist to elbow, is embroidered in close small stitches, line after line after line, and it's only when you pass near that you see the lines are letters, names, a sleeve of names in careful thread. Miquel, who has no manners because no one has left to finish installing them, simply asks her what it says. She looks at the boy for a long moment, then she touches the rows one by one. Domingo, Martin, Gonzalo. Her husband, her sons, you understand, without being told the year. She says the names the way you check the hem of your coat. "I can't read either," she tells Miquel, "but I can read this." Her name is Aldonza, from Pamplona itself, and she's walking to Santiago alone because, as she says with a terrible mildness, there is no one now whose permission she needs. From that evening, without a word of arrangement, her stretch of road is your stretch of road. You lie that night in the pilgrim hospice by the bridge, in the town where all the roads become one road, and you take stock the way your father taught you to take stock of a day's work. Letter, sound in its hem, stone in the scrip under your head, candle, straight and whole in the bedroll, boots greased, drying by the wall, the soles just beginning, at the ball of the foot, to wear thin in a way you're choosing not to think about. An old man, a boy, a German who laughs like a landslide, a widow with her family on her sleeve. Somewhere behind you on the road, a man with a painted box. Somewhere far ahead, an iron cross on a hill of stones, and a censer swinging through the dark of a cathedral like a bell made of smoke. You have no way of knowing that before you reach that cathedral you will stand in a city square and hear 10,000 people go silent at once. The road is carrying you toward that morning at 3 miles an hour. For now, sleep in the Queen's town, by the Queen's Bridge, with the Aga saying one long soft word underneath the arches all night. The days find a shape now, and the shape is the oldest one there is. You rise in the dark with the bell, because the hospices empty at dawn, and the road is coolest before the sun finds it. You walk 4 leagues before the first proper rest, 5 more before dark if the country is kind. You learn to eat as you walk, bread and hard cheese and onions bought at the last town, because sitting down at midday means standing up at midday, and standing up is the cruelest act of a pilgrim's day. The first 40 steps after rest, when your feet have to be talked into being feet again. You learn your own body like a new tool, which toe blisters first, how to lace the left boot looser than the right, that the pain of the 3rd hour is a liar and will pass, and the pain of the 10th hour is honest and must be obeyed. And you learn the company, because the road braids you together exactly as promised. Conrad's laugh finds you from 200 paces back. Mikel ranges ahead like a dog, doubling every distance, and reports back. A dead mule, a good fig tree, a toll post. Aldonza walks beside Guillem, mostly in silence. 2 people carrying their dead in different containers. In the evenings, at the hospice fires, the company sorts itself into a small nation, and you find that you, Bernat, quiet Cooper's son, have become its treasurer and quartermaster without any election, because you're the one who can count, who checks the change, who knows how a barrel of hospice wine should sound when you knock it, and whether the innkeeper's measure is honest. Estella is where the road first shows you both of its faces on the same day. The town sits pretty on its river, and the old book was right. The bread is good, real wheat bread, pale and light after weeks of gritty loaves, and the wine is better, and it costs little, because the vineyards come down almost to the walls. You sit in the sun by the church of San Miguel with wheat bread and a cup of red wine, and for an hour the pilgrimage is almost a pleasure. And in the market square of that same pleasant town, you hear the first friar. He's a Franciscan, grey-habited, young, with a voice too big for his body, standing on a mountain block, and the crowd around him is thick and silent. He is preaching on the pestilence. 2 years gone now, he cries, and have ye amended? God swept the threshing floor, and you have gone back to your dice and your lawsuits and your silks. It was a warning, the friar shouts, and warnings are repeated to those who will not hear. Beside you, a woman with a basket of eggs is weeping without any sound at all, and that is Estella too. Good bread, good wine, and grief standing in the square in broad daylight, listening to a young man explain it. The friar's name, you'll learn, is Fray Martin, and he is walking the road as you are, preaching town by town toward Santiago. You will hear him again. His sermon will not stay the same. Keep him in mind. It's past Estella, in the wine country toward Los Arcos, that the road begins to show you what 1348 did to it, and this is the part no singer puts in the songs. The first empty village you take for an accident, some local ruin, a fire, a feud. A dozen houses, doors gone or hanging, roofs beginning their slow surrender, a church with its door barred with 2 planks nailed crosswise, and nettles. Nettles in the doorways, nettles in the lanes, the plant that follows people the way gulls follow ploughs, thriving on what's left when they stop. No dogs. That's what makes your skin creep, you realise. A village with no dogs is not a village. It's a grave with architecture. Then there's another. Then a hamlet where one house lives. One, smoke from one chimney, and an old man in the doorway who watches your company pass with eyes that have given up asking anything. And Guillem lifts his staff to him gravely, and the old man lifts a hand, and nobody says a word. The fields tell the same story if you know how to read land, and you're a Tarn Valley boy, you know how to read land. Terraces half pruned and half jungle. A big field ploughed in the middle and abandoned at the edges, because the hands that remain plough what they can reach, and let the rest go back to God. Half the world is missing. Conrad's phrase, and it stops being a phrase out here. It becomes a census. Was it like this in France? Michael asks you one evening quietly, for once not performing toughness. Yes. Everywhere? Everywhere I walked. He thinks about this with his chin on his knees. Then the apostle's going to be busy, he says at last, and rolls over and sleeps. And you lie awake wondering whether that was a child's nonsense or the best theology you've heard since Mossack. At Los Arcos the hospices full, plague of a different kind, a spring flood of pilgrims, jubilee year overflow, and so for once you must buy your beds, and you get the education the old book promised about innkeepers. The inn smells of smoke and sour spills. The keeper, a small quick man with mourning bands on his sleeve, wants 2 dineros a head for straw in the loft and a supper of bean pottage. The company's eyes come to you. This is your office now. 2 dineros buys a bed with a mattress in Pamplona, you say. And Pamplona has walls worth the name. 1 dinero, the 6 of us together, and we're gone before prime and will bless your house at the shrine. Blessings, says the keeper, don't buy beans. Then say 1.5, and pour the wine from the barrel by the door, not the one behind you, because the one behind you has been watered so long it's learned to swim. There's a silence with a knife edge in it, and then the keeper laughs, a real laugh, the first one his face has tried in a while by the look of the effort, and you get the loft and the good barrel for 1.5, and he even carries up an extra armful of straw for the boy. In the morning, counting out coins into his palm, you see him glance at Aldonza's sleeve of names and at his own black bands, and he presses a heel of bread into her hands and shakes his head at payment. The road is like this, you're learning. It picks your bones politely, and then, just when you've hardened yourself into arithmetic, it gives you back a heel of bread you didn't ask for, and ruins your accounting. 2 days on, at Logroño, you cross the Ebro on a stone bridge into the lands of Castile, and the changers take their bite again, sanchetes into dineros, and the speech around you shifts another notch, and you're now in the kingdom whose king, though no one on the road yet knows it, has been dead for 3 weeks. And the day after that you come to the town of the man who built the road itself, and there you meet the last of your company. Santo Domingo de la Calzada is named for a living memory of goodness. Domingo, a plain man, no monk, no scholar, they say the monasteries turned him away, who decided 250 years ago that his devotion would be road work. He cleared forest, he laid causeway, Calzada means causeway, he threw a bridge over the Oja, he built a hospice with his own hands and served pilgrims in it, until he died a very old man in 1109, and they buried him, at his own wish, right where his work was by the road, and the town grew up around his grave like moss around a milestone. His hospice still feeds pilgrims. You eat his bread the same evening under the roofline he raised. They tell a story in this town. They tell it to every pilgrim, and it's a fine one. A young German pilgrim falsely accused of theft and hanged, and the saint holding his feet up for weeks so he lived on the gallows, and the judge at his dinner scoffing that the boy was no more alive than the roast fowl on his table. Whereupon the fowl stood up, feathered and crowed. The pilgrims love it. Conrad makes them tell it twice. Is it history? It is a miracle tale, told as gospel by people with shining faces, and I give it to you as exactly that. A story the road tells about itself, about the difference between a judge's justice and God's. You'll notice nobody in the tale doubts that a pilgrim can be hanged on a stranger's word. That part needs no miracle. That part is just the road. The man sitting against a hospice wall, unwrapping his feet as you arrive, is not part of the tale, but he looks like an illustration of it. He is maybe 50, grey-stubbled, thick-wristed and barefoot, and his feet are a butcher's window, blistered, split at the heels, wrapped and re-wrapped, and beside him on the ground, tied together by their laces, clean, greased, whole, sits a pair of the best-made walking shoes you've ever seen. He catches you staring at the riddle of it. "I made them," he says flatly. "I'm a cobbler, Ramon of Toulouse." A pause while he peels a wrapping and doesn't wince, which is worse than wincing. "I walk barefoot to Santiago under penance. The shoes come along so that the penance is a choice every single morning. That was my confessor's idea." Another pause. He was right. God rot him. He doesn't tell you, that first evening, what the penance is for. He tells you much later, in the mountains, quietly, and it is what you will already have guessed by then. A dead man in Toulouse, a tavern, a knife, one moment of a strong hand moving faster than a lifetime of sense. The court gave him a choice of penalties, and the church's road was one of them, and so he walks, sewn into that grey coat like his own letter of guilt, a man whose hands make shoes for other men's mercy, while his own feet pay cash. By full dark he has, without being asked, taken Miquel's rag-wrapped feet into his lap like a farrier with a colt, tutting at the thongs, and rebuilt the boy's wrappings from his own scrap bag, proper soles of layered leather, bound so they'll stay. He works fast and gently and swears the whole time in Toulouse gutter speech, and Miquel sits there letting his feet be handled, stiff as a plank at first, and then, by degrees, nobody comments on not. "Every soul tells the truth about the walking," Ramon says to you over the boy's head, turning one of your father's boots to the firelight, reading the wear at the ball of the foot with his thumb like a man reading a psalter. He hands it back. He looks at you for a moment. Good boots, loved boots. They'll want work before the far mountains. Find me when it's time. That night the company is complete. An old man who knows the road, a boy the road orphaned, a German walking off a graveyard, a widow wearing hers, a cobbler paying for a corpse, a friar somewhere ahead sharpening his sermon on every town anvil, and you, with your hem and your stone and your candle and your dead man's boots, keeping the accounts. 7 days' walk ahead, the towers of Burgos are waiting, and the news from Gibraltar is riding toward the same gates. Between you and Burgos stands the one stretch of this road that even Guillem talks about in a lower voice, the Monte de Oca. It's an oak and pine upland, hours of climbing forest where the road narrows to a throat, and it has been robber country since the days when Domingo the causeway builder worked its far side precisely because pilgrims feared it. In a normal year, the company would simply have waited at the forest's edge until the party grew to 30 staffs and gone through together at midday, singing because noise is armour. This year, the calculation has changed in a way that shames everyone a little. The pestilence thinned the robbers too. The road's own grim joke, Conrad makes it and nobody laughs twice. Still, you go through 30 strong, gathered up at Villafranca at the forest foot, and Ramon walks with his hammer loose in his belt, and Aldonza walks in the middle with the other women, and the forest lets you pass with nothing worse than one long whistle from somewhere upslope, answered by another, far off. Just shepherds, says muleteer too quickly. Nobody stops to check. By dusk you're down at the little monastery of San Juan de Ortega, Domingo's own disciple, another road builder buried beside his works, and the monk who bars the door behind the last of you does it with a thump that says he knows exactly what forest his house faces. 2 days later, from a rise, you see Burgos, and Burgos is the biggest thing you've seen since you left France. Head of Castile, they call it. The royal city of the plain, market of the wool roads, and above its packed roof stands a cathedral that makes your Mossack Abbey look like a chapel. White stone, high-pointed vaults in the French manner. Begun, a carter tells you proudly, in 1221, 130 years of work so far, towers still flat-topped and waiting for the spires some future century will afford. Even unfinished it dwarfs every bell tower in the town, and when its great bell speaks you feel it through the road half a league out. But the glory of Burgos for your kind is not the cathedral. It's a building outside the walls, west of the city on the Pilgrim Road itself, and its name tells you everything. The Hospital del Rey. The King's Hospital. Alfonso VIII founded it, more than 150 years ago, put it under the great convent of Las Huelgas, where the noblest nuns in Castile rule like abbess queens, and endowed it so richly that its charity is famous the whole length of the road. Pilgrims coming east to west start hearing about it at Roncesvalles. Bread without stint, they say, meat, wine, beds with sheets. You don't believe the sheets until you're between them. It's all true, and you spend a day and a night inside the working of a mercy so large it has accounts. Porters at the gate sort the healthy from the sick going to an infirmary with real physicians. In the hall, at long tables, you eat the best meal of the entire pilgrimage. Wheat bread, mutton stew with chickpeas, wine neither sour nor watered, and the servers go along the benches refilling without being begged, because the rule of the house is abundance deliberately as policy, the king's honour measured out in stew. You count above 200 pilgrims fed at one sitting, and a lay brother tells you the house has fed 1,000 in a day in high season, and after the hunger of the emptied villages, the sheer competence of it puts a lump in your throat. This is what Christendom can do, you think, when it organises its pity. That evening, walking back toward the city gate in the pilgrim crowd to see the cathedral lit for Vespers, you hear a familiar voice working, and there he is. Brother Sansa's grown since Navarre. The box is the same, but there's a table now, and on the table, relics. A splinter of the true cross, small, dark, authoritative. In a little case he opens and shuts like an oyster. A knuckle of St. James himself, of the apostle whose whole body famously lies entire at Compostela. But the crowd around the table is not doing that arithmetic. The crowd is grieving Castile, and he's selling touch. Touch the case, kiss the cloth, a coin, a blessing, protection from the pestilence for your children. His silver ring has a brother now. Walk on, says Guillem tired. You walk on, and the crowd is thick at the gate, and it shoves and eddies the way crowds do, and a boy stumbles into you from the left, full weight, clutching your arm, apologising in a gabble, and you catch him by the shoulders, and he's gone, twisting away between bodies like a fish released. Ramon's voice behind you says, flat as a dropped board, your scrip. You look down. Your scrip is open at the mouth, not open, cut. One clean stroke along the underside, the hide's hairy face gaping like a second mouth, and your hand goes in and finds no spare shirt, no dried figs, no little knife with the antler handle that was your father's, and no small leather purse with the 4 days' small coin you kept loose for bread and tolls. Your stomach does what stomachs do, drops through the road, and then, standing stock still in the shoving crowd, you do the inventory, hands moving on their own, the morning ritual dragged out into evening emergency. Letter. Your fingers crush the hem of your coat, and the parchment answers, stiff and dry and there. Stone. Bottom corner of the slit scrip, deep in the fold the knife missed. Your thumb finds the small flat grey weight of your mother's grave. There. Candle. Rolled in the bedroll on your back, above the knife stroke, untouched, there. Boots. On your feet. The band of true silver under your shirt, sweat stuck to your ribs, there. Letter, stone, candle, boots. The road just took 4 days' bread and your father's knife, and left every single thing you actually walk for. You stand in the gate of Burgos shaking, doing sums of loss and mercy, and the sums keep coming out obscenely, unfairly kind. Father Andrea, months dead now to your eyes, but alive as morning in your ears, sewing that hem shut by candlelight. No thief slits the hem of a coat that smells like yours. The old book, in Guillem's recitation, false questers travel with nimble friends. Where the box gathers a crowd, the knife gathers purses. Nobody can prove the boy ran to Sants. You watch the man's table for a while from across the street, Ramon beside you with his hammer hand quiet, and you saw no boy. You only saw the crowd, and the box, and the beautiful broken voice, and you added one more line to the account you're keeping, under Miquel's small black coin. The road will weigh him, Guillem says again, steering you away by the elbow gently, an old man moving a young one back from an edge. It weighs everyone, boy. Come and sleep, sheets tonight. Conrad, outraged on your behalf, noisily re-equips you from his own bottomless pack, a spare knife, figs, half a shirt's worth of good linen, and refuses repayment with such volume that men 3 beds down tell him to be generous more quietly. Aldonza says nothing, but in the morning your slit scrip has been mended. Close small stitches, line after careful line, the same hand that embroiders names, and when you try to thank her, she looks at you exactly as she looked at the river under the bridge and says, "Things should be mended. Where's the sense in a world where nobody mends?" and walks on ahead. And you understand that the scrip was never really the subject. You stay a second day at Burgos because the infirmary sisters insist on lancing and dressing a blister on Miquel's heel that has gone red angry, and so it happens, because of a boy's heel, that you're still in the King's Hospital, in the Great Hall, at the morning meal on the day Castile finds out. You will try for years to describe that morning to people who weren't on the road, and you will always start the same way. It began with the bells stopping. Burgos is a city of bells. They stitch its hours together. Cathedral, parishes, convents, Las Huelgas across the meadows, a constant weather of bronze you stop hearing by the second day, the way you stop hearing rain. Mid-morning, mid-meal, mid-sentence, the weather stopped. All of it. Every bell in the city quit together, and 200 pilgrims looked up from their stew at once at a silence with edges, and then, alone, after a long moment, one bell of the cathedral began again. Slow, single strokes, spaced by 10 heartbeats. A toll. A lay brother by the hall door said, to no one, in a voice you can still hear when you choose to, "That's a passing bell. That's the great bell. Who in God's name gets the great bell?" And through the open door, faint across the river meadows, you could hear the city beginning to roar. You go in with the crowd, because everyone goes in, the whole hall rising, stew abandoned, 200 pilgrims and the lay brothers too, streaming along the river road toward the gate, joining the streams from the suburbs, wool carters leaving their wagons, women with wet hands, and the closer you come to the walls, the thicker the human water gets, and all of it is asking the same question in 4 languages, and nobody has an answer. Only the bell tolling, and now the other churches have caught it, and the whole city is one slow bronze grief with no name on it yet. By the time you reach the square before the cathedral, there is no square. There is a single creature made of people, thousands, packed shoulder to blade, craning toward the cathedral steps. And you know your trade on this road by now. You are nobody, and nobody's place is the edge. You find it. The company pressed together in the mouth of a cloth merchant's doorway on the square's rim, Michael wedged between you and the doorpost, Aldonza's hand gripping the boy's shoulder, Conrad behind you all like a wall against the crowd's slow heave, and from there, over 1,000 heads, you watch Castile learn. Men come out onto the cathedral steps. Even at this distance you can read the grammar of them. Churchmen in copes, the archbishop's household, and city men, the alcaldes of Burgos in their furred robes, and between the 2 groups a rider's dust still on one man's shoulders, a courier shape, hollow with distance. A trumpet sounds, 3 long notes, and the bell stops, and the silence that follows is the loudest thing you have ever stood inside. You cannot hear every word from the edge. Nobody at the edge hears every word. That's the truth of every great morning like this one. And what you get is the crowd itself passing the proclamation backward over its own shoulders, sentence by sentence, in a hissing relay, so that the news reaches you as a wave visibly crossing water, and you watch it come, and then it arrives and breaks over your doorway, and this is what it says: "The king is dead. Don Alfonso, by the grace of God, King of Castile, of León, of Galicia, Lord of the land your feet are standing on, dead, not in battle, dead of the pestilence, in his camp before Gibraltar, among his soldiers, on the morning of Good Friday." The great dying which everyone in this square had let themselves believe was over, walked into a royal camp at the far end of Spain, and took the King of Castile off the face of the earth in the same week the priests were singing of resurrection. You stand at the edge, and you watch 10,000 people take that fact into their bodies at once. It is not a scream. That's what you couldn't have guessed, and what you'll never forget. It's a sound like the whole square exhaling through its teeth, a vast low moan with sobs breaking through it the way stones break through a river's surface, and then it is movement. Hands everywhere, thousands of hands rising and falling in the sign of the cross, so that the crowd shivers all over like a field under wind. A woman near your doorway drops straight down to her knees on the cobbles and begins the Pater Noster loudly with her arms spread wide, and around her others go down too, patches of kneeling spreading outward through the standing mass, and Aldonza's hand on Michael's shoulder tightens and tightens until the boy reaches up and puts his hand over hers and leaves it there. And under the grief, moving through the square faster than the grief, comes the other thing, the thing you can smell. You've stood in its presence before in Mossack, in the church, the day the first houses were sealed. Fear, because every soul in this square is doing the same arithmetic at the same time. The pestilence killed the king. Kings live behind walls of servants and physicians and incense. If it reached through all that and took the anointed of God at the height of his fame, then it is not finished. It was never finished. It is out there in the south right now, and roads run north. You hear the word before you see anyone say it. Pestilencia. pestilentia, moving through the crowd in that hiss relay, and this word travels faster than the proclamation did. And then, halfway across the square, someone falls down. You see it only as the crowd sees it. A sudden circular ripple, a space tearing open in the packed mass the way water tears around a thrown stone, people surging back from a centre you can't see, and the moan of the square sharpens into screams, real ones now, and the circle widens with horrible speed, everyone shoving away from an old man. You learn afterward. One old man who fainted, heat and fasting and terrible news, an ordinary human faint, but the square doesn't know that. The square knows only that a man went down on the day the pestilence killed the king, and for one long swaying moment the whole crowd stands on the edge of becoming a stampede. 10,000 bodies deciding together, and your doorway is downstream. Conrad's arm comes over all of you like a roof beam. Ramon has Miquel's collar. You have Aldonza's arm and the doorpost. You brace. And it is a voice that catches the crowd. From the cathedral steps, one of the churchmen, an old man's voice but trained on 40 years of knaves, cracking out over the square not words of comfort first, but the Kyrie. The plainest chant there is, 3 words the whole square has known since before it could talk, and he drives it out over their heads, again and again, and the crowd's own habit rescues it. 1,000 voices answer before their owners decide to, then 5,000. The chant catches the way flame catches, and the surge slows, and the circle around the fallen man stops widening, and 2 friars are through to him now, lifting him, showing his flushed, breathing, mortified old face over the crowd, alive, alive, a faint, only a faint, and the square shudders and sings and weeps and does not stampede, and you stand in your doorway with your company gripped together in one knot, singing a Kyrie through a locked throat, watching a city hold. That evening the news puts on its formal clothes, heralds at the crossroads. The king is dead. Pray for his soul, and his son Don Pedro reigns, 15 years old. God keep him. Every church door in Burgos hangs black. The bells toll in ordered courses now, grief with a liturgy to live in, and the whole city moves as if under water, and men stand in doorways telling and retelling what is known, and this is where you learn the details that will ride up and down the road for months. How the king's counsellors begged him to lift the siege when the dying began in the camp, and how he refused, saying he would not leave Gibraltar unwon a second time, and stayed until it took him. And the tale already polished from mouth to mouth of how the funeral procession bore him away towards Seville between silent ranks, and how even the Moors on the walls of Gibraltar, they say, stood still and made no move against the retreat, out of honour for a dead enemy. That last is a story the road tells, mind. You weren't there. Neither was anyone who tells it to you. But Castile needs it to be true this week, and if you'd stood in that black-hung city, you would not have been the one to argue. You do not yet know, and Castile does not yet know, what kind of king the boy will make. The men in the doorways are already asking it. Lo! The road will hear that name, Pedro, for a long time, and history is standing quietly behind the year 1350 with its hands folded, saying nothing. Leave it there. A sleeping man doesn't need Castile's next 30 years. Neither did Burgos that night. What you'll keep is smaller, and the road gives it to you the next day. Because the question in every pilgrim mouth by morning is the obvious one. Go on or go back? If the pestilence is loose in the south, is it coming north? Is it on the road? A party of Provençals turns for home that very day, and no one mocks them. The hospice halls hum with it, Fear does its work of unbraiding what the road has braided. And in the evening, in the courtyard of the King's Hospital, Fray Martin preaches, the young friar from Estella arrived in Burgos in the wake of the news like a gull in the wake of a ship. The crowd expects the sermon from the square at Estella, the scourge, the warning, amend, amend, and he begins it. You can see the old sermon standing in his mouth. And then, and you will always believe you watched this happen, watched a man's theology break and reset live in front of you like Ramon setting a bone in a boot, he stops. He looks out at a courtyard of pilgrims who have all buried their people, at the widow with her sleeve of names, at the boy with no one, at all the grey coats full of grief walking 500 miles on blisters to keep faith with their dead. And he leaves the scourge unfinished, and he says roughly in a voice with no pulpit left in it at all, "The King of Castile is dead of the same death as your children. It is no respecter. I have preached it as God's rod 2 years, town upon town, and maybe it is, I'm not wise enough to know what I claim to know. But I look at you, and I see what I can see. You were not driven onto this road. You chose it, out of love for your dead, and you are walking to an apostle to lay that love down where it can be kept safely forever. So walk. If the dying comes again, let it find every one of us doing the most human thing we ever invented, which is to carry our grief somewhere wholly on our own feet. Walk on, and fear nothing that walks behind you." Silence in the courtyard. Then Guillem, old Guillem beside you, says, "Ultrea," quietly. The road's own word, the old pilgrim cry. Onward, further, and the courtyard takes it up the way the square took the Kyrie. Ultrea, ultrea. Not a shout, a murmur, 200 voices with sheets waiting, and mountains ahead, and that is the vote, and it carries. In the morning your company shoulders its scrips in the cold, and Burgos tolls behind you, mourning its king in ordered bronze, and you walk west out of the black-hung city, going on, with everything you own checked in the usual order, letter, stone, candle, boots, and the widest, emptiest, quietest stretch of the whole road opening in front of you like a psalm with no words, the Meseta. And after that morning in the square, the silence of it will be exactly what every one of you needs. Nobody warns you properly about the Meseta, because there's nothing to warn about, and that's the warning. West of Burgos, the land rises onto a table and stays there. Wheat country, high and treeless, folded in long, slow swells like a sea that stopped mid-heave, and the road runs across it straight as a chalk line, visible ahead of you for an hour at a time, visible behind you for an hour at a time, with a sky over it all so big it has provinces, no forests, no walls, no shade. A village every 3 or 4 leagues, sunk in a crease of the land with its church tower showing first, like a mast before a hull. Between villages, wind, larks, wheat, and your own feet. That's the inventory, for 8 days. And here's what no one tells you, what you could not have believed in the roaring square at Burgos. It heals you. Because there is nothing to decide. The road doesn't fork, the day doesn't vary. You rise in the dark, you walk into a sunrise that takes the whole eastern sky to happen. You watch your shadow walk ahead of you, long, then short, then behind you, long again, and your legs do their work without consulting you. And somewhere in the 3rd hour the walking stops being something you do and becomes something you are, and the mind, with nothing to grip, finally opens its hands. Men talk on the Meseta the way they talk at night, without looking at each other, or they don't talk. The company strings out along the line of the road, each walker alone inside the wind together, and you find you are saying in rhythm without having chosen to, the only prayer that fits the terrain. 1 league, then another. 1 league, then another. Aldonza starts to sing on the second day, quietly, walking, not for anyone. A spinning song, then a lullaby with the names left out. Old Navarre's tunes for standing at a loom that no longer exists in a house that no longer stands, and nobody comments because comment would be a hand clapped over something just barely reopened. By the 4th day, Miquel knows the refrains. The land out here took the dying differently, and you read it as you walk. Villages whole and working. Hornillos, it's one long street smelling of bread and dung and rain on dust. Castilleries under its ruined hill castle, where the wine cellars are dug into the hill itself and a widow sells you wine through her window, hauling the jug up out of the cool dark on a rope. Then, between them, the blanks. A village with its roofs fallen in and a fig tree growing through a doorway. A church alone in the wheat with no village left around it at all. Its bell gone, its door open to sheep. Guillem stops the company at one of these, and you all file in and stand in the cool, sheep-smelling dark under the bare bell arch and say a pater noster for whoever's under the floor, because somebody is always under the floor and there's no one left above it to say anything. Things should be mended, Aldonza says at the door in that voice of hers, and nobody asks what she means because it would take a lifetime to answer. At Fromista you sleep beside a church the colour of honey, San Martin, older than the road guide itself, built when the millennium was young, its stone carved inside with beasts and men no two alike. The meseta's other lesson, laid alongside the ruins, what people can leave standing when they're let. The bridge at Itero, 11 arches over the Pisuerga, carries you out of the diocese of Burgos. Your boots, and you notice it now on the flat monotony where there's nothing else to notice, have begun to speak, a small creak at the ball of the left foot, leather thinning past the last of old pears risoling, and you think of Ramon's thumb reading the soul by firelight. They'll want work before the far mountains, and you put the thought away in the scrip of things not yet due. Carrion de los Condes is where the meseta shows you its teeth, quietly, the way it does everything. It starts as a joke, because with Conrad everything starts as a joke. The German announces at supper that Castilian beans have declared war on Cologne, and everyone laughs, and in the morning he isn't at the benches, and he isn't laughing. The flux. Dysentery. The road's oldest disease, the pilgrim killer that has no drama in it at all, just a big man turned grey and folded around himself, suddenly old, suddenly frightened in a way the pestilent sermons never managed to frighten him, because there is no sermon in it, only shame and mess and a thirst that torments and cannot be safely quenched. In a bad year, in a poor village, this is how pilgrims die by the 100, not on gallows or in gorges, but on straw of the flux, nameless, 300 leagues from their parish. The road keeps what it takes, Guillem says, standing in the infirmary doorway, and for once the old man's proverb has no comfort in it whatsoever. But Carrion is not a poor village, it's a monastery town on the pilgrim road with an infirmary that has seen 10,000 bowels. And the brothers go to work with a bored competence that is the most reassuring thing you've ever watched. Barley water, rice-thin gruel, rest, a boiled trust in time. The company stops. Nobody proposes it. The company simply doesn't leave, and that's when you understand. Watching Ramon whittle by the infirmary door, and Aldonza bully the kitchen for cleaner water, and Miquel run errands for the herbalist like a paid apprentice, that somewhere between Roncesvalles and here, this stopped being 6 strangers on the same stretch of road. 3 days. On the second, Conrad is sitting up, thin as his own shadow, demanding proper Rhine wine as medicine and being given barley water, and the ward laughs, and his laugh, cracked and quarter strength, rolls down the row of beds anyway, and a dying old canon 2 beds over smiles at the ceiling. On the third evening Conrad calls you over, you specifically the treasurer, and presses coins into your hand for the infirmary box twice what the stay could cost, and says, not laughing at all, in Cologne I could not do anything, you understand me. 3 sons, and I could not do one thing but dig. He closes your fingers over the coins with both his huge hands. Here a man can at least pay for the straw the next fellow lies on. That's not nothing, Frenchman. Write it in your accounts. You write it in your accounts, the ones you keep where the knife can't reach. Then the road again, and the last of the great plain, Sahagun, a city of brick. Because out here even the churches are built of baked earth, arches and towers of rosy brick around the bones of a Cluniac abbey, so mighty they call the town a little Rome of the road. Black hung like everywhere. The king's morning has arrived before you at every gate since Burgos, riding while you walked, and by now it has settled into the land like weather, muffled bells, black cloth going grey with dust. Prayers for Don Alfonso worked into every mass, and the fear of the south quieter each league, not gone, but walked on, the way the road walks on everything. 8 days after Burgos the plain begins, at its own pace, to end. The ground gathers itself. Far ahead, low on the western sky, standing in a haze you at first take for cloud, is a line of blue with snow on it. Mountains again, the far mountains, the ones your boots were warned about, and at their feet, one more great city of the road, León. León was a legion's camp before it was anything, the 7th, and the name still says so if you listen, and has been a royal city, seat of kings for 400 years. You come in through walls with Roman bones in them, into streets that smell of tanneries and rain, and the company goes dusty and limping to do the thing every pilgrim does in León before hospice, before bread, before anything. You go and stand in the light. The Cathedral of Santa Maria is younger than Burgos's and lighter than seems lawful. A French-hearted church begun 100 years back and raised fast, and its builders made a wager that still frightens engineers. They hollowed the walls out and filled them with glass. More glass than stone, the proud Leonese say. You step in out of a grey afternoon, and you stop walking because your body refuses to continue until it understands. The whole interior is on fire with colour and none of it burns. Reds like held-up wine, blues you have no name for, whole companies of saints and kings standing in the walls made of light itself, and when the clouds move outside, the entire church breathes, colour swelling and dimming across the floor, over your hands, over Michael's upturned unguarded face, over the black mourning cloth on the altars, and Aldonza stands in a pool of moving blue with her sleeve of names held up into it, turning her arms slowly, watching the light soak into the stitched letters one row at a time. Nobody in the company says anything for a long while. A church like Roncesvalles argues that God is shelter. This one argues that God is light, and grief itself, held up at the right angle, can be made to glow. Even here the road keeps its ledgers. You say a prayer for the dead king in a side chapel dressed in black, where his ancestors lie carved in stone nearby at San Isidoro, and you add, because the account is open and it's your habit now, your father, your sisters, your mother, Aldonza's 3, Conrad's 4, Ramon's 1. The dead of the company travel with the company. It's the lightest heavy cargo in the world. And it's in León, in the market the next morning, that the road settles its account with Brother Sants. You hear it before you see it, that particular crowd sound jeering with a saw edge in it, and Miquel, ahead as always, comes weaving back through the stalls with his face complicated and says, "Come, come and see." The pillory in the market square of León is a plain post with irons, and locked in the irons, bareheaded in the drizzle, is the beautiful broken voice. You learn the tale in 3 sentences from a chestnut seller, and every sentence lands like a dropped coin. Took alms for a hospital of orphans that doesn't exist. Tried it on the alcalde's own widowed sister. The seals on his letters proved forged. The bishop's men and the city's men for once in perfect agreement, and now here he stands for 3 market days with his forged letters hung around his neck on a string, and after, the chestnut seller says with relish, prison, and after that, only God and the judges know. Around his feet, the coins of his box have been nailed to the postboard as evidence, and the crowd does what crowds do. Rotten cabbage, worse words, small boys with mud. The road will weigh him, Guillem had said twice, and here is the scale, public, sordid, dripping. You expect to feel the account close. You've carried this page since Navarre. Miquel's 1 black coin, your father's antler knife, 4 days' bread, the crowd's grief milked at Burgos with a fake splinter of the cross. You stand at the edge, your natural station, and you watch the man's face, which has stopped performing anything at all. Rain running off a nose that is just a man's nose, and what you feel instead of triumph is a sort of cold instruction, like reading a tally that balances and finding no pleasure in the arithmetic, only the fact of it. It's Miquel who closes the account, and not the way you'd have written it. The boy stands looking for a long time. Then he steps out of the crowd, right up under the post, and the jeering nearby falters, curious, and Sance's eyes come down to him. And Miquel, plague orphan of Navarre, 13 years old, digs in his wrappings and takes out a coin, a small black coin, the twin of the first, half of everything you know him to possess, and sets it on the postboard among the nailed evidence, and says, in his flat, clear, terrible child's romance, "For the orphans, wherever they are," and walks away and doesn't look back, and the men near the post look at the coin and at the thief, and stop throwing things and drift off awkwardly, as if the market had run out of what it came for. Guillem catches your eye. "The road weighs everyone," he says. "Sometimes it uses one of us for the doing." He watches the boy go and adds mostly to himself, "Whoever raised that one for 13 years, they finished the job before they went. You leave León on a grey freshening morning by the western gate. Conrad on a hired mule for 2 days more, 3 dineros a day plus its feed and worth everyone, roaring downhill at commerce and uphill at the mule, and the mountains stand ahead now with their heads white. And somewhere up in them, at the top of the longest climb of the Castilian road, waits an iron cross on a pole and a hill made of what pilgrims put down. Your scrip rides light on your shoulder, except in the one corner. That corner has weighed the same 500 miles, and this week, at last, you will empty it. The road west of León crosses the river Orbigo on a bridge so long it seems to be showing off. Arch after arch after arch, near 20 of them striding over water and water meadow both, because the Orbigo floods wide in spring, and the bridge builders respected it. You pace it out at over 200 paces, longest bridge of the whole road, then Astorga on its hill, walled by Rome, an old proud junction town where the silver road from the south meets your road, gates black draped like everywhere in this morning kingdom. and a hospice where the garlic soup comes so thick that Conrad, restored to his full volume, declares Castile forgiven for the beans of carrion. And then the land tilts up in earnest and doesn't stop. This is the climb into the Monte de León, the highest ground of the entire pilgrimage, higher than the pass at Roncesvalles, and it is a different kind of country at once. Broom and heather and grey stone, wind with an edge on it even in May, and thin, stubborn villages of slate-roofed houses where the Maragato muleteers live, a folk unto themselves, close-mouthed and honest, who carry the trade of half of Spain on their mule trains, and take pilgrims' coin without ever quite approving of anyone. Rabenal, the last true village, where custom says you sleep before the high crossing, so that you take the summit in the morning with the whole day in hand. The hospice fire that night burns turf and broom sweet and sharp, and Gillam sits closer to it than he used to. You notice these weeks that the old man is spending himself, still never stopping, never hurrying, but at night his face has begun to look like the mountains do, the same shape as always, and further away. Tomorrow, he says to you quietly while the others sleep, is the day the road is for. You have your stone. You have your stone. You've had your hand in the scrip corner all evening, holding a small flat piece of mossack. 15 years I've carried the second one, Guillem says, and shows you, a white pebble, river round. From the ford below our village. She sat there of an evening. It was her place for thinking. He turns it in the firelight and puts it away, and says nothing else at all, and you both sit and let the turf smoke do the talking, and it's the closest thing to a night with your own father you've had since the autumn of 1348. You go up before dawn, all 6 of you, into a cold wind under the last stars, the village dogs of Fonsabadon, that thin, hungry hamlet near the top, sounding you past in the dark. The east goes grey, then rose. The broom smells like honey and dust. The path climbs the last shoulder, bends, and there against the brightening sky it stands, a tall trunk of a pole, planted upright in the summit saddle, and at its top, black against rose-coloured morning, a plain cross of iron, and beneath it, filling the saddle, spreading wider than a threshing floor and higher than a man at its heart, grey as sleep, quiet as snow, the stones, not a cairn, a hill made by hands, one hand at a time, one grief at a time, for longer than anyone can say. They tell you a hermit named Gaucelmo raised the cross 250 years ago to mark the pass for pilgrims lost in fog and snow, and they tell you the heap was old even then, that shepherds and Romans and folk before the Romans dropped stones here for their own gods' reasons, and no one alive knows the truth of the bottom of that hill, only the top of it. The top is this morning, and the pilgrims climbing the last steps ahead of you, each one stooping, each one placing, none of them throwing. Nobody throws, you notice. Every stone in that whole grey mountain of sorrow was set down like something being put to bed. You'd thought about what to say for 500 miles, composed things, walking, fine sentences for the moment, prayers with architecture, and when the moment comes, and you stand at the foot of the pile with the iron cross swaying its shadow over the stones in the wind, and you take out of your scrip the small flat grey stone from the earth over your mother's heart, carried from the far side of the Pyrenees on a dead woman's vow, every word you built falls down, and what you say, kneeling, setting it gently in a crevice between a rough red stone and someone's smooth white one, settling it with 2 fingers so it cannot slip, is, "We came, Mama. It's me, we came," and the wind takes it, the way it's taken everything said on that summit for 1,000 years, and the weight goes out of your scrip and something with it that was never in the scrip, and you kneel there breathing while the sun comes up the last inch and lights the Iron Cross gold, and you understand at last in your body what the returned pilgrims could never explain in Moissac. The stone weighs nothing. The stone weighs more than everything else you own. Both were always true. That's why it works. Around you, quietly, the company is doing its own laying down. Guillem hat off, white pebble placed with 15 years of care, standing after with his face turned full into the wind and his eyes shut, and the wind doing for him what wind does, giving a man a reason his face is wet. Conrad, setting 4 stones in a row, patting each one once, the way you'd settle children under a blanket. Ramon kneeling awkwardly on ruined feet, setting 1 dark stone quickly, like a man paying a debt he can't look at, and crossing himself with his jaw working. And Aldonza. Aldonza takes from her scrip 3 stones wrapped each in cloth, unwraps them one by one, and as she sets each into the hill she speaks aloud, clearly into the wind, for the first time since the bridge at Puente la Reina, the names off her sleeve: Domingo, a stone; Martin, a stone; Gonzalo, a stone, and then stands and pulls her sleeve down straight with a firm, sharp tug, like a woman finishing a piece of work, and says to the hill, conversationally, "There, you wanted to see Santiago. It's just there now, over the mountains," and turns and takes Miquel's hand, and Miquel lets her. The boy has no stone. He stands looking up at the cross and at the hill of what everyone else put down, and says to Guillem, in that flat, clear voice, "I don't have anyone to leave." And Guillem, who's been the road's answer to every question since the first mountain, looks down at him and says, "No, lad, you're what somebody left. The hill's not for you. The rest of the road is. You go down the western side into the morning with an empty corner in your scrip, and the descent takes all day and doesn't feel like it. Down and down out of the wind, out of the broom and slate, into a green-cupped country that opens below you like a held-out bowl. El Bierzo, warm, walled with mountains, vines on every slope, and at the bottom of the descent, in the valley of a river full of round white stones exactly like a certain hills, waits the town of Ponferrada, and beyond it, the last wall of Spain, the mountains of Galicia, with the pass of Cebreiro in their teeth, which is precisely where, as promised by a cobbler's thumb in Santo Domingo, your father's boots decide they have carried you far enough. Ponferrada announces itself with a castle, and the castle is a lesson in how fast the world can change its mind. It's a Templar castle, white-walled above the river, big enough to garrison a crusade, and it is 38 years empty of Templars, because in 1312 the Pope dissolved that whole proud order at the King of France's urging, their houses seized, their knights scattered or worse. An order that had guarded pilgrims like you for 2 centuries, snuffed out inside 5 years. Now the castle keeps other masters, and the town under it goes on about its business, and its very name remembers an older kindness. Ponferrata, the iron-bound bridge a bishop threw over the sill for pilgrims almost 300 years ago. Bridges outlive their builders. Orders of knighthood, it turns out, don't necessarily. You sleep under the castle's shadow, and Conrad, staring up at the empty white walls in the dusk, says the only quiet thing you'll ever hear him say about the workings of kings. Big men fall further. Our king of the road there at Burgos, these nights, walk small friends, through the warm green Bierzo then, vines and cherry trees, and at Cacabello's the Hospice sisters pour a dark young wine, and at Villafranca del Bierzo, the last town before the wall of mountains, you stand before a church door that stops the whole company in its tracks once its meaning is explained. It's the north door of the Church of Santiago, plain enough stone, and they call it the Puerta del Perdón, the door of pardon. Because the church, which can be a hard institution and knows it, made here one of the gentlest laws you've ever heard of. A pilgrim who has come this far and can go no further, whose body is broken or whose sickness is final, may receive at this door the same pardon and grace he would have received at the shrine itself. The mountains ahead are the cruelest of the road. Some people arrive at their feet already spent, and so mercy, rather than making the dying climb, walks back down the mountain to meet them at this door. Aldonza reads the door a long time in her way. "Whoever thought of that," she says finally, "as had buried someone." The mountains ahead have one more gate, the valley narrowing at Herrerias, the hamlet of the iron forges, where smiths have shod horses and mended pilgrim gear beside a cold loud river since anyone can remember, and it's on the stony track there, on a wet morning, that your left boot opens. You feel it before you hear it, a sudden coolness, a wrongness, the road arriving against your bare skin, and then the flap of the soul letting go at every step. You sit on a wall and look at it, and it is not a repair. The sole has worn through at the ball to a hole the size of a plum, and the leather around the hole is soft as cheese rind, and the side seam has begun to follow. 600 miles from Moissac, 100 from the Apostle, your father's boots are dying, and you sit there on a wet wall holding one like a man holding a hurt bird, and the grief that ambushes you is out of all proportion to boot leather, and you know exactly why, and so does everyone standing around you, and nobody says a word about it being only a boot. Ramon takes it from your hands. He turns it in the grey light, thumbs the wound, reads the seam, exactly as he did by the fire at Santo Domingo, and then he sits down on the wall, unslings his own pack, and brings out his hoarded roll of tools and the flat, stiff, waxed bundle you've seen him take out and put away, untouched, at 20 hospice fires, his last piece of proper sole leather, oak-tanned bend leather, carried from Toulouse across an entire kingdom, the good stuff, the stuff a cobbler saves. "Ramon," you say, "that's yours. You've been keeping it." "I've been keeping it," he agrees, already cutting, the half-moon knife going through the leather with a sound like a held breath, "for something worth it. A man walks his father's boots to Santiago. The boots finish the walk. That's worth it." He works fast in the wet, on his knees on the stones in front of you like the brother at Roncesvalles with the basin, awl and waxed thread and small iron nails from a twist of cloth, muttering his gutter Occitan at the seam, and Herrerias rings its hammers up the valley, and inside the hour your father's boots are shod anew, double-soled across the wound, stitched and pegged, ugly and utterly sound. He won't take payment. You know better than to push a coin at him by now, and offer anyway, and he looks up from packing his tools with the first entirely unguarded expression you've seen on his face in 300 miles. "Every soul tells the truth about the walking," he says. "Mine tell theirs. Let this pair tell that a man from Toulouse could still make something whole." He stands, wincing on his own ruined bare feet, and shoulders the pack of shoes he's not permitted to wear. "Now climb. They say Galicia starts in the clouds." They say right. The climb to Cebreiro is the steepest sustained work of the entire road, the track hauling itself up out of the valley through hazel and oak and then out of the trees altogether, and the clouds come down the mountain to meet you halfway so that you finish the climb inside them, in a white blindness with rain in it, wind pushing, the world reduced to 10 feet of stony track and the bent backs of the pilgrims ahead. The new soul grips. You climb on your father's renewed feet into the sky, lungs soaring, Roncesvalles lessen in your legs, the mountain teaches the pace, and near the top the mist tears open for 10 heartbeats and shows you the whole Bierzo behind and below, green and tiny and already yesterday and close as again, and then there are walls in the mist, round walls. You've reached Cebreiro, the gate of Galicia, a handful of houses on a saddle in the clouds, and the houses are like nothing you've seen in any kingdom, round as baskets, stone-walled, roofed in deep, shaggy thatch that comes down nearly to the ground. The old mountain houses called palosas, built round so the wind that scours this pass finds no corner to grip. Inside the one that serves pilgrims, people and fire and cattle, warmth share one smoky ancient room, and the mountain folk feed you broth and rye bread and a cheese like cream made solid, and the rain hits the thatch above like a thing with hands. There is a church up here too, small, thick-walled, 1,000 years old in its bones, and the mountain people will tell you, all of them, with one voice, what happened in it, in living memory, around the year 1300, a snowstorm night, a peasant from the valley below climbing to mass through weather that should have killed him, and the priest, a tired man of little faith, sneering inwardly at a fool who'd die for a bit of bread and wine, and then, at the consecration, in the priest's own doubting hands, the bread and wine becoming visibly before both their faces flesh and blood. The doubter and the faithful fool taught in one flash which of them understood the world. They keep the very chalice here. Pilgrims kneel to it nightly, and you kneel too, with the fire smoke in the rafters and the storm on the thatch, and I'll tell you honestly what stands here and what is told. The chalice stands here, the church stands here, the story is the mountain's own, told by firelight for 2 generations now, and where sight ends and telling begins on that snowy night. 50 years ago, no one can show you the seam. You are very high up, very far from home, in a round house in a cloud, and it does not feel like a place where the usual rules press very hard. In the morning the cloud is below you, filling the valleys like white rivers, and the sun comes up behind you over all of Spain, and ahead westward, ridge falling behind green ridge into blue distance, is the last kingdom of the walk, Galicia, where the apostle is. 8 days if the rain allows. The rain does not exactly allow. The rain negotiates. Galicia is green the way furnaces are hot, as its whole nature from the inside out. You come down from Cebreiro into a country of deep lanes worn shoulder high, into the earth between field walls, oak and chestnut arching overhead, everything mossed, everything dripping, the paths themselves running like brooks half the day, and rain arriving not as an event but as a mood, soft, sideways, 20 times a day. The company walks hooded and steaming. Your new double soul shrugs it all off, and every splashing league you bless a barefoot man from Toulouse. The land is poor and the people are open-handed. That combination you've stopped being surprised by. Farm wives put out milk for pilgrims in the church porches. The villages are small, granite, smoke-blackened, full of cattle and children. This misty corner took the great dying more lightly than the plains, they say, though no place was passed over, and after the emptiness of Castile, the mere noise of hens and daughters quarrelling feels like wealth. Castella, where pilgrims of an older custom used to carry a limestone block from the quarry 40 miles on to the cathedral kilns, their sweat literally in the apostles' mortar, Sarria on its hill. And then, at the bottom of a long wooded descent, the river Minho, the great water of Galicia, with the town of Portomarín on its banks and its bridge in the middle distance, and something wrong with the picture that your road-trained eye reads before your mind does. The river is brown and wide and moving with that particular greasy smoothness that big water has when it's angry, carrying whole branches down its middle, and it has climbed its banks into the low fields, and at the bridge you can see it from the slope. The flood has done its work on the approaches. The timber causeway to the bridge's first arch stands a foot deep in moving water, planks lifted and gone, men at work on it like ants at a broken stem, which is why there's a boat. You see it as you come down to the crowd at the water meadow's edge. A broad river barge, poled and roped, shuttling pilgrims and market folk over the swollen water while the causeway is mended, and a ferryman taking coin at the plank, and the boat riding out into that brown shove of current with its gunwales. You narrow your eyes, with its gunwales 2 hands above the water, then 1 hand they keep boarding. A mule goes on, the gunwale sinks, and Guillem stops walking and says, in the voice of a man reciting scripture, the words he gave you on the climb out of Saint-Jean, 10 mountains and 2 kingdoms ago. When the rivers are big, some ferrymen load their boats with so many pilgrims that the boats turn over. Get into no boat that sits low. The company stands on the bank and watches the arithmetic with everyone's lives in it. The ferryman is calling for 2 more, the fare's a measure, come along. The boat is full the way a spoon is full at the brim, 1 nudge from spilling. And downstream of the crossing line you make yourself look. The brown water runs seething through a fence of half-drowned willows that would comb anything out of the current and hold it under with 100 hands. We wait, you say, your treasurer's voice, and it comes out flat with certainty, and for once nobody, not even Conrad, negotiates. You watch the overloaded boat go. It makes it, that trip, shipping brown water over the gunwale at midstream while its passengers cry out and its ferryman leans on the rope, and it comes back lighter and goes again, loaded worse, and makes it again, the way dice come up 6 twice for the man too drunk to stop, and your company sits on the wet grass on its packs and does not get in line, and eats hard cheese and waits. Some waits cost nothing and buy everything. Guillem calls this the cheapest wisdom on the whole road, wisdom somebody else already paid for 200 years ago, and a hot-tempered French pen wrote it down, and a monk read it aloud to an old man in a winter kitchen, and the old man carried it 700 miles to a riverbank in Galicia to spend it this afternoon on you. By middle afternoon the rain slackens, and the river, mountain-fed and quick to anger, is quick to forgive. It drops 1/2 foot, the causeway men lay their last planks, and the bridge opens, and you cross the Minho dry-shod, high over the brown water, on stone, the way queens and bishops and road-builders have been insisting pilgrims should cross rivers for 300 years. And nobody drowned at Portomarín that day, and that, the no story, the nothing happened, is the finest thing the old book's warnings ever buy anybody. You'll never know the disasters you walked around, that's the deal. You pay attention, and in exchange nothing happens, and nothing happening is the road's version of a miracle unsigned. The last days go by like beads on a string. Palas de Rey. Melode, where the roads from the sea route come in, and the Pilgrim River swells again with Flemings and English off the boats. deep lanes, oak and chestnut shade, rain, cheese, rain. And the company changes key without anyone writing new music. Miquel now walks a dozen paces ahead of Aldonza, like a boy running point for his own household, doubling back to report bakeries, puddles, saints' shrines. At the evening fires he sits inside the circle, against her knee, without performing indifference first. And one wet noon you hear the two of them, Navarrese both, arguing about the right way to sing a spinning song refrain with the passionate unimportance of family. And you catch Guillem's eye, and the old man's face folds into its deep, dry creases. And neither of you says one word because some mendings are like hem seams, they hold best unremarked. And on the second to last evening, at a hospice fire 2 short stages from the shrine, Guillem tells the company, in 12 unhurried sentences, about his wife. Her name was Azalée. She snored, feared thunder, gave bread to everyone, and once walked this whole road at his side, complaining about his pace from Le Puy to the sea. 15 years gone. Her pebble is in the hill behind you, under the iron cross. Tomorrow's the mountain of joy, he finishes, staring into the fire. She got there first the other time, ran like a girl. I want it known. And here the driest ghost of a smile, that I let her win. Tomorrow the mountain of joy, Monte del Gozo, the last low hill of the whole 500 miles, from whose top, if the rain lifts, a pilgrim gets the thing he has walked a season for, the first sight of the towers of Santiago de Compostela. You sleep badly, the way children sleep before feast days, and you're not ashamed of it, and neither is anyone else in the room. The last morning of a pilgrimage has customs of its own, and the first one is a bath. There's a stream a couple of leagues short of the city, in a scatter of houses the pilgrims call Lavacolla, and the name is an old joke your company enjoys enormously once it's translated, because what it names is what happens here. Pilgrims strip and wash, all over, and specifically, the name insists, those parts a season of walking has treated worst. Out of reverence, you don't come before an apostle wearing 500 miles of yourself. So the whole morning traffic of the road bathes in a cold Galician stream, Conrad bellowing like a walrus, Miquel scrubbed by Aldonza to within an inch of his life, and you duck your own head under the running cold and come up with your ears ringing, clean for the first time since León, a new man in old clothes, and then the hill, the little hill. After the Pyrenees and the Iron Cross and Cebreiro, this one is nothing. A green swelling with the road going up it, and it is the most famous climb of the whole 500 miles. Monte del Gozo, the Mount of Joy, so called for exactly one reason. There's a custom, old as the road. Whichever pilgrim of a company reaches the top first and sees the cathedral first, wins it. They call him the king of the pilgrimage. In some companies they race it laughing, in some it goes by age or by grief, and there are men all over Christendom, Guillem says, whole families now, carrying the surname King, Leroy, König, because a great-grandfather once ran up this grass faster than his friends. Your company doesn't discuss it. As the slope steepens, the walkers simply look at one another, and then, one by one, at Miquel. Go, says Aldonza. He goes like a hare. You come up the last of the hill in time to watch him reach the crest, and stop, and stand stock still against the sky, a small ragged figure with his staff, and then leap, actually leap, straight up off the earth, both fists over his head, shrieking it down the slope at the top of 13 years of lungs. Santiago, Santiago, and there it is. The company gains the crest around him, and the land sinks away westward, and in the middle distance, grey and gold in a moven patch of Galician sun, cupped in green hills at what is nearly the world's western edge, lies the holy city, smoke rising from 1,000 hearths, and above the smoke, unmistakable, drawing every eye on the hilltop the way a lodestone draws filings, the towers of the Cathedral of St. James. Around you the hilltop is full of pilgrims arriving into their own moment, and it takes everyone differently. Some cheer, some drop to their knees in the grass. A Fleming sobs like a bass viol. An Englishwoman laughs and cannot stop, and Guillem stands leaning on his staff with his hat off, looking at the towers with an expression you finally cannot read at all, 15 years deep, and Aldonza looks with her hand flat on her stitched sleeve, and Ramon looks with his jaw set like a man approaching a court, and Conrad's arm lands across your shoulders like a felled oak, and the king of the pilgrimage stands in front of you all, crowned with drizzle, pointing at the towers with his whole arm as if his company might otherwise miss them. Fray Martin is on the hilltop too, come up with the morning's crowd. No mounting block this time. He looks at the weeping, laughing, kneeling hilltop, and visibly decides the sermon has been preached by the view, and confines himself to 5 words, loudly, gladly. Well walked all of you, Ultreya. Going down into the city takes an hour and feels like a dream you're being allowed to keep. In through the Francigena gate, the French gate, where the road of the Franks has entered for 3 centuries, into streets narrow and roaring, granite and rain-shine, money changers and cook shops, the smell of frying fish and tallow and wet stone, hawkers crying lodging, crying candles, crying badges, and the Pilgrim River pouring through it all in one direction only, everyone's pace quickening now, around a last corner with the crowd compressing like water at a spout, and then the street opens out, and you are in the square, and you look up, and there is the end of the road. You expected stone. Nobody had told you about the colour. The great west front rises over the square with its towers, and the doorway at its heart, the famous triple doorway they call the Portico de la Gloria, is painted like a book's illumination, like a garden in heaven, blues and reds and gold, and as you come up the steps out of the square's roar into its shadow, the whole doorway resolves into people, carved people, hundreds of them, and not the stiff, solemn ancients of your grandfather's church doors. These lean toward each other. They smile. They play. 24 old men around the arch above are tuning instruments, fiddles and harps and stranger things, an entire orchestra in stone caught in the moment before the music starts. Master Matteo built it, the canons will tell anyone. Finished in the year 1188, 60 years' work of a genius, and below the central Christ, on the pillar that holds the whole doorway up, sits St. James himself, staff in hand, resting, welcoming, a pilgrim done walking, and on that central pillar, at the height where a standing man's hand falls, there are holes in the marble, 5 of them, finger holes in the carved tree of Christ's own ancestry, and they were not chiselled. They had been pressed into solid marble by hands, by arriving pilgrims' right hands, 1 hand per pilgrim, 1 pilgrim at a time, each one reaching out at the end of 500 miles to touch the pillar and give thanks for 160 years, hand after hand after hand, day upon century, until the stone itself gave way and took the print of gratitude the way snow takes a footstep. Think of what stone is. Think of what a touch is. Then count the touches it takes for touching to carve marble, and know that every single one of them was a person who set out and was afraid and walked and arrived. You wait your turn in the shuffling line. You fit your fingers into the marble, into the worn, warm hollows, exactly the shape of everyone, and you say what you were sent to say. Thanks. Just thanks. Behind you, Aldonza fits her hand where yours was. Behind her, a Fleming. Behind him, the world. What's left after the doorway goes by in incense and torchlight, and you will keep it always in pieces, the way one keeps any overwhelming day. The Mass, in a nave-packed wall to pillar with every nation of the road, mourning black still on the altars for a king dead 10 weeks now, and the singing in that stone like standing inside a struck bell. The censer, and yes, the stories were true. At the high moments they burn incense here in a vessel the size of a wine crock, swung on a ship's rope through the crossing in great smoking arcs over the pilgrims' heads, a bell of silver smoke tolling above you, trailing sweet fog, and its purpose is frankly practical as well as glorious. 1,000 walked bodies in one stone room, but as it swings roaring overhead, gathering light, what it looks like is a censer in the hand of something too large to see, and the embrace. Behind the high altar, a narrow stair takes pilgrims up, one at a time, behind the apostle's own jewelled image seated above his tomb, and the custom is as intimate as everything else here is vast. You put your arms around his stone shoulders from behind like greeting kin, and hold on, and say into his ear what you came to say. You hold the apostle. The stone is smooth as a worn threshold, polished by a century of arms. You say her name. You say all their names. That much you can do from memory. And then, because the parchment matters, because Father Andreo's careful columns deserve better than memory, you do the last of it properly. At a side altar, that evening, by arrangement with a patient sacristan, you take out the linen bundle. The candle has crossed 2 kingdoms in your bedroll, softened on the meseta, chilled hard again at Cebreiro, and it stands now a little bowed, like everyone who made the journey, in the sacristan's iron pricket. You unfold the parchment of names. The wax takes the flame at once. Sweet moissac beeswax, the smell of the parish hives, of home, of Candlemas mornings with your sisters, rising into Galician stone. And you read, slowly in your workshop, Latin and your Tarn Valley Occitan, mispronouncing nobody, 4 columns, every name, the sacristan standing witness with his hands folded, Peronella, Gilhelma, your father, your mother near the middle, on down to the last widow of the last lane, the whole shape of a town's grief spoken aloud, one small flame working through it steadily at the tomb of St. James until the names was done, and you stood in the smoke and the quiet, the vow, her vow, discharged, complete, kept. They give you a shell. That's the seal of it, the ancient badge of this one shrine, the scallop of the Galician shore sewn to the hat or the scrip, sold in baskets at the north door, and no pilgrim may wear it who has not stood where you're standing, cheap as a shell, priceless as proof, and a confessor at the cathedral, having heard you and having read with real attention a certain letter with a parish seal, its parchment soft as cloth, now from 500 miles of your walking warmth, unpicked from your hem by Aldonza's needle that morning and never to be sewn back, pronounces you, Bernard of Moissac, a true pilgrim of St. James, vow fulfilled, penance complete, and marks it so. The letter did its work to the last line. Father Andreu's stitches held the whole way. Around you, in those 2 days, the company completes itself, each in their own chapel of the same church. Ramon kneels before a tribunal of 2 board canons and 1 letter of penance, and comes out into the square carrying his certificate of absolution like a man carrying an egg, and sits down on the cathedral steps and puts on his shoes. His own shoes, the beautiful pair, carried 500 barefoot miles. He laces them with hands not quite steady, stands, takes 3 steps on the granite and laughs, one short, astonished bark, the first you've ever heard from him, at the outrageous, forgotten luxury of leather. Conrad buys shells for 5, one for each grave in Cologne and one for his hat, and books passage in a wine ship for the first leg toward Rome and the Jubilee, because half the world is missing, and the half that's left has a second apostle to thank. Aldonza stands a long time at the tomb rail with her sleeve, and whatever was said there was said in thread and silence. But she comes away with her arm around the king of the pilgrimage, and it is settled between them by then, in the wordless way the road settles things, that the road back to Pamplona will be walked together, and what happens after that will be called by its right name, which is home. St. James looks after those with no one else, the boy's mother had said. The boy walked to the apostle with no one. Watch him walk away with someone. That's how the apostle does it, Guillem observes. Rarely fire from heaven, usually a widow with a needle. And Guillem stands at the portico on the last morning, at the pillar, his hand in the worn marble hollows, his third arrival, his last. Everyone on the steps can feel that word, though no one says it, and the old man weeps at last without shame, without sound, his hat in his hand, before the carved musicians tuning their instruments for a music that has been about to begin for 160 years. She ran up that hill, he says finally to you, wiping his face with the flat of his hand. Let me win, did I say? Boy, I never caught her in 40 years. I was only ever following. He puts his hat on. That's the whole road, son. You follow them as far as the living are allowed. Then you put your hand in the stone, and you turn around, and you live, which is the last thing the road has to teach, and the one nobody warns you of. Santiago is not the end. You're 700 miles from your bed, and a pilgrim walks home. The road back is the same road, and it is not the same road at all. You walk it in high summer now, the whole journey run backward through a warmer light. Galicia's lanes dusty where they streamed, the Minho low and mild under the bridge at Porto Marine as if it had never eaten willows, the Meseta gone gold, the wheat that was green shoots in the morning spring stand now to your waist and full of wind noise, being cut by thin crews with too few hands, the third harvest since the great dying, gathered by the half of the world that's left. The shell on your hat changes what the road is to you. Coming west you are a walking need, going east you are a walking proof, and men ask you at fires shyly the same question in every kingdom. Is it true about the censer, about the doorway, about the handprints in the marble? It's true, you say, it's all true, I touched it. And you watch the road light lamps in their faces, and you understand that you've become what the returned pilgrims of Mossack were to you. A wintering fire's proof that the world's far edge is real and reachable and kind. The company pays itself out behind you like thread off a spool, one parting at a time, each at the crossroads that was always waiting for it. Conrad first at the coast road, off to his wine ship and his second apostle, crushing the breath out of each of you in turn and roaring back twice from down the road with final instructions about proper wine, Fray Martin at León, where the preaching is needed. The last you see of him is a grey back and big voice heading into a market crowd, telling Castile to walk on and fear nothing behind it. Ramon at Burgos, southward for Toulouse, shod, absolved, straight-backed, carrying his certificate and his tools. He takes your father's boots measure one last time with his thumb, at the ball of the foot, out of pure craftsman's habit, nods at his own work and says, "They'll see you home, then hang them up. Boots have earned things too." At Puente la Reina, on the Queen's Bridge itself, at the high point over the Arga where you first saw her reading the water, Aldonza and Miquel turn for Pamplona. There are no speeches. She checks the mending on your script seam with 2 fingers, the way you check a hem. The king of the pilgrimage shakes your hand like a man, then wrecks it by hugging you like a boy. Hard, quick, done. You watch the 2 of them out of sight down the eastern road, the widow and the orphan, walking exactly in step, and Guillaume beside you says nothing in a way that says everything, and then there were 2. And Guillaume walks with you all the way over the pass, Roncesvalles, Val Carlos, Saint-Jean, downhill through Gascony day by slow day, because the road home is one road as far as Gascony, and you spend them the way the whole walk taught you to spend miles, unhurried, unhurrying, 1 league, then another. At the parting of your ways at last, at a plain fork by a chestnut tree with no shrine, no bridge, no anything, just 1 road becoming 2, the old man takes your hand and grips it, and this is the hardest goodbye of the 7, and both of you know it. 2 men who buried their houses and walked to the world's edge and back on the same feet. "Will you go again?" you ask him. "A 4th time?" "I'll go every day," he says. "From my chair, boy. That's how the road works, didn't you know? You only walk it once with your feet." He settles his hat, dust-coloured, rained on for decades. The rest of your life, it walks in you. And he goes, at that pace of his that never stops and never hurries north, and the chestnut leaves close the road behind him. What became of them all, you'll want to know in the years after, and here I'll tell you the plain truth the way this channel owes it to you. The road kept no register of its companies. These 7 walked in 10,000 pairs of boots that year. Their like filled every hospice from the Arga to the Minho, and the hospice rolls record bread counts, not endings. Whoever they were, all the real ones, the widows with stitched sleeves, the orphans who gave their coins away twice, the old men following their dead uphill. The road closed over them gently, the way the sea closes and holds them all. That is all anyone can honestly say, and it is enough. You walk into Moissac in late September, in the smell of the vintage, wine must riding the river air the way it rode it every autumn of your childhood, and the abbey bell is ringing, none as you come up from the bridge, the same bell that rang you out, and your street is impossibly narrow and impossibly itself, and Father Andreu, greyer, smaller, comes out of the church at the shouting of the neighbours' children, and stands in the porch and looks at the shell on your hat, and doesn't manage to say anything at all, and neither do you, and the whole surviving street ends up in the church saying a Te Deum nobody organised. You nail the scallop shell above the workshop door, where the tally sticks used to hang. You take up the ads, the vintage is waiting, and the town needs its cooper more than ever, there being only the 1 of you now. And on the first evening before any of that you walk out to the churchyard to the grave with the small flat absence in the earth over her heart, and you sit down on the grass beside it the way you used to sit by her fire, and you tell her all of it. The mountains and the bridge and the king's bell tolling over Burgos, the glass of León, the iron cross at dawn and what you said there, the doorway where hands have worn holes in marble, the candle, the names, all 4 columns, everyone spoken at the tomb, the vow paid in full. It takes until dark. The abbey rings Compline over the wall. The tarn says 1 long soft word under the bridge, the way the Arga did, the way rivers do everywhere, and you sit with your mother in the dark of the town you were both born in, 25 years old now, home, emptied out and filled up, and the last thing you tell her is the simple sum of the whole account, the thing the road taught a cooper's son to count above all else. We came back, Mama. It's me. I'm here. And then there is the rest of a life, and it is made of evenings like this one, the workshop warm with shavings, the hoops singing on the stake, the vintage in, the casks tight, the river low and quiet. On fine evenings you sit in the doorway under the shell with a cup of the new wine, and your feet, which will ache faintly in wet weather for the rest of your days, and which you would not trade for a bishop's feet, rest flat and grateful on your own doorstone, going nowhere. Neighbours' children sit on your step some nights and ask for the road, and you give it to them the way Gillam gave it to you. The true warnings and the true wonders, the salt stream and the Queen's Bridge, the hill of stones and the doorway full of musicians, and you always tell them which part's a stone and which part's a story, and they always like the stories best, and that's all right. That's how roads stay alive. You made a vow once, or inherited one, which the priests say is the same thing, and you kept it. You walked out with a letter, a stone, a candle, and a dead man's boots, and you came home with none of them. The letter is read out and retired, its work done. The stone is in a hill on a mountain in León, holding its small place among 10,000 years of set-down sorrows. The candle is smoke above an apostle's tomb, gone up with 4 columns of names. The boots, resoled in a valley of forges by a barefoot man from Toulouse, hang on the workshop wall, retired with honour, and their souls tell the truth about the walking. The scrip is empty. That was the point. That was always the point. You carried it all so far precisely so that you could put it all down. And centuries will pass. Hear this part with your eyes closed. It asks nothing of you now. Centuries will pass, and the road you walked will outlive everything that frightened you on it. The pestilence will burn itself out, return, and burn out again, and finally become a chapter children study, no more able to empty a village than a word can. The kingdoms will merge and quarrel and change their names. The boy king of that black-hung spring will get a grim surname from history and be argued over for 600 years. The Templars' castle will stand empty and be argued over too, and the road will simply keep going under all of it, indifferent as a river. They walk it still. This is true, and it may be the gentlest true thing I know. Right now, tonight, in the world you'll wake up in tomorrow, there are people asleep in hospices along that same line of earth, at Roncesvalles, at Cebreiro, their boots drying by the wall, their feet aching in the old honest places, having walked a day over the Queen's Bridge at Puente la Reina, which still stands and still carries walkers over the Aga, 6 arches of honey-coloured stone 900 years young. They follow painted yellow arrows now instead of a hospitaler's word, and carry a pilgrim's passport stamped town by town, the direct great-grandchild of the letter that rode sewn in your hem. They still leave stones at the iron cross on its mountain. The hill of set-down griefs is taller than it was when your mother's stone joined it, and it grows a little every single day, because people are still carrying and still putting down. And at the end, in the granite city in the rain, the great censer still flies through the cathedral on its rope, roaring smoke and light over the heads of the arrived, and the marble pillar of the portico still holds, worn soft and deep, the print of a right hand, pressed into solid stone by nothing but gratitude, arriving one person at a time for 800 years, hands like yours. That hollow is the truest record humanity has ever kept of itself, and no one signed it, and everyone signed it. Some things don't change. The grief doesn't change. People still lose their whole worlds, and still cannot simply sit in the ruins. And the remedy doesn't change either, the oldest one we ever found. You stand up, and you carry what's left of your love somewhere wholly on your own 2 feet. 1 league, then another, and somewhere along the way, without your noticing the moment, the weight shifts and sits easier and lets you live. The walking cure, older than the road, older than the apostle, as old as the first person who ever got up from beside a grave and moved. So let today set down its load now, the way a scrip comes off a shoulder at evening. You've come far enough. You're warm enough where you are, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof and a bed, and the night around the house like hills around a hospice, and that's more than the road promises anyone, and it's enough. It's enough. It's enough. Tomorrow there will be miles of one kind or another. There always are. Tomorrow there will be weights to pick back up and carry cleverly, and accounts to keep and mending that should be mended. But that's tomorrow. The rule of every hospice on the road is the rule of this hour. The door is barred, the fire is banked, the walkers are in, and nothing more is asked of anyone until the bell. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took a cooper's son in a long dormitory at Roncesvalles, on stone that held 500 years of tired travellers before him. Let the world fade the way France faded behind him from the top of the pass, blue, then pale, then gone. Let the noise quiet street by street, the way a morning city quiets after the last bell. Let your thoughts slow to the old pace, the one the mountain teaches, the pace you can hold forever, slower and slower, 1 league, then another, then no leagues at all. Only the warm dark of a safe room full of sleepers and someone keeping the door. The road is under your feet even now. It's under everyone's. It runs on ahead of you through the dark past the salt stream and the wheat and the hill of stones, all the way to the field of the star, and you don't have to walk any of it tonight. You've arrived. This bed is the shrine tonight, and you're the pilgrim, and the whole day's walking is done, and the shell is over the door. Put your hand in the worn place in the stone. Say thanks. Turn around and rest. Good night.